The invitation arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope with the family crest stamped in gold. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. The words inside were simple. The Harrison family reunion. Saturday, 2 p.m., Grand Oak Estate. Attendance expected. There was no personal message, no apology, no signature. Just an expectation that I would show up. I almost laughed. For 8 years, my father had treated me like I no longer existed. After I left the family construction business to start my own community housing nonprofit, he called me a disappointment. According to him, I had thrown away a guaranteed fortune to play hero. Since then, birthdays passed without phone calls. Holidays came and went without invitations. Even when my mother passed away 3 years earlier, my father barely spoke to me during the funeral. Now, suddenly, I was invited to the biggest family gathering of the year. Something felt strange. "You're not actually thinking about going, are you?" my wife Emma asked as she poured 2 cups of coffee. "I don't know. They've spent years pretending you don't exist." "I know. So why now?" I looked back at the invitation. "Because if I don't go, they'll say I abandoned the family." Emma sighed. "They'll judge you whether you go or not." She wasn't wrong. Still, something inside me wanted answers. Maybe this reunion was my father's awkward attempt to make peace. Or maybe I was fooling myself. Either way, I decided to go. Saturday arrived bright and warm. Grand Oak Estate looked exactly as I remembered. Luxury cars filled the enormous driveway. Perfect gardens surrounded the mansion. Waiters in white uniforms carried silver trays across the lawn, while distant cousins laughed beneath decorated tents. It looked less like a family reunion and more like a celebrity event. The moment Emma and I stepped out of our modest sedan, conversations slowed. Heads turned, whispers spread. "He's actually here!" I didn't think he'd come. "That's Daniel. My uncle said he failed." I pretended not to hear. Emma squeezed my hand. "You've got this." We walked toward the main lawn where nearly 100 relatives had gathered. Every expensive suit, every designer dress, every fake smile. Then I saw him. My father. Richard Harrison. At 70, he still stood tall, dressed in an expensive navy suit, surrounded by executives and family members hanging on every word. He noticed me almost immediately. His smile disappeared. For several long seconds, neither of us moved. Finally, I walked forward. "Hello, Dad." He looked me up and down. "So, you came?" "I was invited." "I suppose technically you were. Not exactly the warm welcome I'd imagined." Emma politely smiled. "It's nice to see everyone again." My father barely acknowledged her. Instead, he turned toward another guest. "Excuse me," and simply walked away. Emma whispered, "Well, that went well." I forced a smile. At least he didn't throw me out immediately. I had no idea how wrong I was. Over the next hour, the pattern became obvious. Relatives greeted one another warmly. They avoided me. Some nodded politely before walking away. Others openly ignored me. Only one person seemed genuinely happy to see us. My godmother, Margaret Collins. She was my late mother's closest friend and had been part of our family for over 40 years. She embraced me tightly. "Oh, Daniel. I've missed you." "I've missed you too." She stepped back, smiling warmly. "You look happy." "I am. I can tell." Unlike everyone else, she asked about my work. She wanted to hear about the affordable homes our nonprofit had built. She smiled proudly when I explained how dozens of struggling families finally owned safe places to live. "Your mother would have been proud." Those words nearly broke me. Before I could respond, someone called Margaret away. She touched my shoulder gently. "Stay until the end." "What?" "Promise me." I frowned. "Why?" She smiled mysteriously. "Just promise." "I promise." She nodded and walked away. I watched her disappear into the crowd, wondering what she meant. By late afternoon, everyone gathered beneath the largest tent. A microphone stood on the stage. That could only mean one thing. My father loved speeches. He stepped forward confidently. My wonderful family. Applause erupted. He spoke about tradition, legacy, success, hard work. Then his eyes found mine. And, unfortunately, the crowd became quiet. Every family also has examples of failure. My stomach tightened. No, surely he wasn't. He pointed directly toward me. My son Daniel. Every face turned. He had every opportunity to inherit this family's business. People shifted uncomfortably. He rejected it. He abandoned generations of hard work. He chose charity over responsibility. A few relatives chuckled. He could have been leading a billion-dollar company. Instead, he shrugged dramatically, he builds cheap houses and asks for donations. More laughter spread. Emma grabbed my arm. Daniel. I felt every eye burning into me. My father continued. This family believes in success. We believe in ambition. We don't celebrate failure. Someone near the front actually clapped. I couldn't believe what was happening. He wasn't simply criticizing me. He was putting on a performance. Then came the final blow. If anyone here is wondering whether Daniel is still part of this family, he paused long enough for complete silence. He isn't. Gasps echoed across the tent. I refuse to let someone who rejected everything this family stands for share our name. Emma stood. That's enough. My father ignored her. Turning toward two security guards, he raised his hand. Escort them off my property. For a moment, no one moved. Then the guards slowly approached us. The humiliation was complete. Children stared, relatives whispered. Some looked embarrassed, others looked entertained. I searched the crowd for one familiar face. Margaret. She was standing near the back of the tent. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't shocked. She wasn't angry. She simply watched my father with calm, unreadable eyes. As the guards reached us, she quietly folded her arms. A faint smile crossed her face. It wasn't a smile of amusement. It was the smile of someone who already knew how this story would end. And for the first time that afternoon, I realized my father had made a terrible mistake. The two security guards stopped only a few feet away from Emma and me. Neither of them looked comfortable. One of the guards, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, cleared his throat. Sir, I'm sorry, we've been instructed to escort you off the property. Emma's grip tightened around my hand. It's okay, I whispered. Let's go. I refused to give my father the satisfaction of seeing me argue. The crowd parted as we began walking toward the exit. Conversations resumed in hushed whispers. I can't believe Richard actually did it. Poor Daniel. He should have stayed away. No, Richard went too far. Even some relatives who had ignored me moments earlier now looked uneasy. Public humiliation was one thing. Throwing your own son out of a family reunion was something else. Just as we reached the edge of the tent, a calm, commanding voice echoed behind us. Stop. Every footstep froze. The room fell silent. I recognized the voice instantly. Margaret. Slowly, she walked toward the center of the tent. She wasn't hurried or angry. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew she didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. My father forced a smile. Margaret, this is family business. She looked directly at him. No, Richard. Her voice remained perfectly steady. This became my business the moment you forgot your promise. A ripple of confusion spread through the guests. My father frowned. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think you do. She stepped onto the stage and gently picked up the microphone from its stand. No one tried to stop her. The room was so quiet that the sound of the microphone being lifted seemed deafening. I've remained silent for many years, she began. I watched this family celebrate wealth while forgetting kindness. I watched pride replace love. And today, she looked toward me, I watched a father publicly humiliate the only child who truly honored this family's values. Several relatives lowered their eyes. My father laughed awkwardly. Margaret, you've always been emotional. She ignored him. Instead, she reached into her leather handbag and removed a thick, sealed envelope. The gold seal on the front immediately caught everyone's attention. I had seen that seal before. It belonged to my grandfather. My father suddenly turned pale. "Where did you get that?" Margaret smiled faintly. "Exactly where your father told me it would be." The crowd exchanged confused glances. Richard stepped forward. "Give me that envelope." "No." His voice became sharper. "Margaret, that's private." "It certainly is." She looked around the tent. "But after today's disgrace," she paused, "I believe everyone deserves to know the truth." Emma looked at me. "Do you know what's happening?" I slowly shook my head. "Not at all." Margaret carefully broke the seal. Inside were several neatly folded documents and a handwritten letter. She held up the letter. "This was written by your father, William Harrison, 2 weeks before he passed away." Gasps swept across the crowd. My grandfather had been respected by everyone. He had built Harrison Construction from a small local company into a national business. His word carried enormous weight, even years after his death. My father reached for the microphone. "That's enough." Margaret stepped back. "Touch me, Richard." Her voice was quiet. "I dare you." He stopped immediately. She unfolded the letter. "I won't read every word." She looked toward me again. "But everyone should hear one particular paragraph." She adjusted her glasses. "To my children and grandchildren." The guests leaned forward. "A family's greatest wealth is not found in money, but in character." Silence. "If any heir values power over compassion or humiliates family for personal pride, that person has abandoned everything I built." My father shifted nervously. Margaret continued. "The one who protects this family's honor through kindness, not wealth, shall be considered my true successor." Whispers erupted across the lawn. "What does that mean? Was there another will?" "I've never heard this before." Richard forced a laugh. "My father wrote lots of sentimental letters." Margaret slowly raised another document. "This wasn't just a letter." Her eyes locked onto Richard's. "It was an instruction." My father's confident expression disappeared completely. "No." She nodded. "Yes." He took another step toward her. "Margaret." She interrupted him with one word. "Disinherited." The microphone carried that single word across the entire estate. It echoed through the tent. No one breathed. Several relatives looked from Richard to Margaret in complete disbelief. My father blinked. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious." He laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous. I'm the sole owner of Harrison Construction." "You are the acting chairman." She corrected him immediately. "There is a difference." Confusion spread through the crowd again. Margaret calmly held up another folder. "Most of you believe Richard inherited everything after William died." She looked around the gathering. "That is not what happened." Every face stared at her. "William created a family trust." Another wave of whispers followed. "The company, the estate, the investment portfolio, the vacation properties. They were all placed inside that trust." Richard's voice rose. "Stop talking!" Margaret ignored him. "I was appointed trustee." This time the silence was absolute. Even the waiters had stopped moving. Emma looked at me with wide eyes. "Your godmother controls everything?" I had no idea. Neither had anyone else. Margaret continued speaking with remarkable calm. "The trust contained one non-negotiable condition." She looked directly at Richard. "If the acting chairman publicly dishonored a direct family member without just cause," she held up the signed legal document, "that chairman would immediately lose every right to control the trust." My father's face turned ghost white. "No." "The trust would then pass to the next eligible successor chosen by William Harrison." One cousin whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Oh my God." Richard lunged toward the stage. "This is a lie!" Before he could reach Margaret, the family's attorney, who had been sitting quietly near the front, stood up. He adjusted his tie. "I'm afraid." He looked directly at Richard. "Mrs. Collins is telling the truth." A wave of shocked gasps swept through the crowd. Richard stared at the attorney in disbelief. You knew? The attorney nodded. I've known for 12 years. Richard looked around desperately, searching for someone, anyone, to support him. Instead, he found only stunned faces. Then Margaret slowly closed the folder. This reunion isn't over. She looked at me with a gentle smile. It's time everyone learned why William Harrison believed Daniel, not Richard, was the person who truly deserved to carry this family's legacy. Every guest turned toward me. For the first time in years, they weren't looking at me with pity. They were looking at me with respect. And my father's perfect world had just begun to crumble. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The cheerful atmosphere that had filled the reunion only moments earlier had completely disappeared. Guests stood frozen beneath the white tent, staring at Margaret, then at my father, and finally at me. Even the children sensed something extraordinary was happening and fell silent. My father was the first to recover. This is absurd, he shouted. You expect everyone to believe that after all these years, I'm suddenly no longer in charge? Margaret calmly folded the documents and handed them to the family attorney. I don't expect them to believe me, she said. I expect them to believe the legal documents your father signed. The attorney opened the folder and adjusted his glasses. I have reviewed these documents every year since William Harrison passed away, he announced. The trust is valid, the conditions are enforceable, and today's events have activated the succession clause. Murmurs swept through the crowd. So Richard really lost everything? I can't believe this. My goodness. My father turned toward the attorney. You work for me. The attorney shook his head. No, Richard. I work for the Harrison Family Trust. Those words landed like a hammer. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my father's eyes. He looked around the gathering, hoping someone would defend him, but no one moved. The relatives who had laughed at my humiliation now avoided his gaze. The executives who had stood beside him quietly stepped away. His confidence was disappearing with every passing second. Margaret turned toward the guests. There is something else you all deserve to know. She removed another envelope from her handbag. This is a personal letter William asked me to keep until the day Richard proved he valued pride more than family. She unfolded the letter carefully. My beloved family, she read. If you are hearing these words, then Richard has made the mistake I feared most. A hush fell over the estate. I built Harrison Construction to improve people's lives, not simply to make money. Success means nothing if you lose your compassion. Several relatives wiped tears from their eyes. Margaret continued. When Daniel came to me years ago asking for advice, he told me he wanted to build affordable homes for struggling families instead of luxury developments. I stared at her in surprise. I had completely forgotten that conversation. He wasn't asking for money, she said. He was asking if his grandfather would be disappointed. Her eyes met mine. I told him the truth. She looked back at the letter. William smiled when I told him Daniel's dream. Gasps spread across the crowd. He said, that boy finally understands why I started this company. Tears filled my eyes. For years, I had believed my grandfather would have sided with my father. I had been wrong. Margaret smiled warmly. William secretly donated to Daniel's nonprofit every single year through anonymous charitable foundations. I looked at her in disbelief. What? She nodded. The scholarships. The housing grants. The emergency building funds. They all came from your grandfather's trust. I felt my knees weaken. For years, I had wondered how our small nonprofit survived difficult times. Anonymous donations had always arrived exactly when we needed them. My grandfather had been helping us all along. He believed in you, Margaret said softly. He simply wanted you to succeed because of your character, not because of his name. My father slammed his fist onto a nearby table. This is manipulation. No, Margaret replied. This is accountability. He pointed at me. He's weak. He gave away opportunities. He'll destroy everything I built. I finally spoke. No, Dad. The crowd turned toward me. I never wanted your money. I never wanted your company. I wanted a father. Silence. I spent years wondering what I had done wrong. I blamed myself. I kept hoping one day you'd call. One birthday, one Christmas, one conversation, but it never happened. My father's expression softened for just a moment. Then his pride returned. You walked away. I nodded. Yes. Because every project we completed was about profit. I wanted to build homes people could actually afford. You called that failure. I looked around at my relatives. Last year, our nonprofit completed its 500th home. Several guests exchanged surprised looks. 500 families now have a safe place to live. We've helped veterans, single parents, teachers, families who lost everything after natural disasters. I smiled. I may never become a billionaire, but every night I sleep knowing someone's child is safe because of the work my team does. The applause began with my cousin Sarah. Then another cousin joined. Soon, dozens of relatives were clapping. Even people who had ignored me earlier stood to applaud. Emma squeezed my hand, tears running down her cheeks. I've always been proud of you, she whispered. Margaret waited until the applause faded. There is one final matter. The attorney stepped beside her. According to the trust, he said, Daniel Harrison is now the primary beneficiary and the next chairman of the Harrison Family Trust. The announcement stunned everyone. I immediately shook my head. I don't want revenge. The attorney smiled. No one said anything about revenge. Margaret looked at me. Your grandfather expected that answer. She handed me another envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. It read, True leadership isn't proven by accepting power. It's proven by deciding how to use it. I smiled through my tears. I'll accept one condition. The attorney nodded. I'm listening. Harrison construction will continue. My father looked up hopefully. But things will change. I turned toward the executives. We will create an affordable housing division. We'll invest in rebuilding communities. We'll provide scholarships for young tradespeople. We'll expand disaster relief construction across the country. Several executives began smiling. Those ideas reflected the values my grandfather had written about. I looked at my father. You spent your life building buildings. I'm going to spend mine building futures. For the first time, he had no response. His shoulders slumped as the weight of his choices finally caught up with him. One by one, relatives walked over to Emma and me. Some apologized for staying silent. Others admitted they had believed my father's version of the story for years. I accepted every apology. Holding on to anger would only continue the cycle. As the sun began to set over Grand Oak Estate, the reunion slowly transformed into something it had not been in years, a family gathering built on honesty instead of fear. Before leaving, Margaret wrapped me in a warm embrace. Your grandfather knew this day would come, she whispered. I just wish he could have seen it. So do I, she smiled. I think he did. I looked across the estate one last time. The place where I had been publicly rejected only hours earlier had become the place where my grandfather's true legacy was finally restored. I hadn't won because I inherited a fortune. I had won because I never let bitterness change who I was. And in the end, that was the greatest inheritance of all.